Hi, my name is Robbie Flannery, aka Doc Robb. I have a PhD in plant biology with an emphasis in environmental horticulture and a specific expertise in hydroponic crop optimization for cut flower production and controlled environment agriculture from my alma mater, UC Davis. Go Aggies. You may have heard me say a couple of phrases just then that may not make a lot of sense, like controlled environment agriculture or cut flower production. And of course, what is environmental horticulture? So cut flower production is basically, producing flowers to sell. Like think about roses or even lilies that you cut and sell it later on in the marketplace. Well, cannabis is just the same thing. We are growing flowers and selling them to the public. And what's controlled environment agriculture? Well, it's when you grow something in a controlled environment, like a greenhouse or an indoor facility. And then environmental horticulture, which is what I studied in my PhD research, is basically just the understanding of all the environmental factors that go into producing and cultivating a crop such as cannabis. For my PhD research, I had to validate new technology that would be used in a controlled environment agriculture situation. New technology that is used to help control the environment or to monitor the environment. I feel very, very fortunate to have this expertise where I look at the environment for growing the crops in controlled environment agriculture, validate new technology, and then apply that to the cultivation of that crop. And the reason why I feel so fortunate to have all this expertise is because basically I get to play in my own playground, growing cannabis, using new technology, and exploring new ways of growing this plant. It took a lot of work and willpower to get this PhD. However, I just like to think of it as a really complicated and convoluted way to get Arnold Schwarzenegger's autograph. Let's go a little bit deeper into what environmental horticulture is. Well, it's the study of cultivating crops while focusing primarily on the environment around those crops. As cannabis cultivators, all we are really doing is providing an optimal climate, an optimal environment for those plants to grow. The plants are doing all the hard work, really. Understanding what environmental factors are necessary for an optimal plant growth for cannabis is extremely important. In fact, I think someone should probably write a book about this. Actually, somebody already did. That somebody happens to be me. I co-authored the book, The Cannabis Grower's Handbook, with the guru of ganja himself, Ed Rosenthal, and one of the best wranglers of eccentrics and academics I've ever met, Angela Baca. This is the most recent revision of Ed Rosenthal's classic book, Marijuana Grower's Handbook, that he wrote many decades ago, and has been the go-to book when it comes to cannabis cultivation. We brought a lot of science into this book too. In fact, 11 different PhDs provided content for the science behind all the techniques and technology in this book. In fact, we dedicate an entire section of this book to limiting factors. In other words, the environmental factors that limit photosynthesis. And so what are those limiting factors we were talking about in this book? In the book, Cannabis Grower's Handbook, we talk about the 6 limiting factors to photosynthesis and what they are, how to help them, and the type of equipment you can use to help your grow be optimized. And then one limiting factor we talk about in the book, light. It's one of the biggest ones. Everyone almost has an issue with light at some point in their cultivation experience. The second limiting factor we talk about in the Cannabis Grower's Handbook is carbon dioxide. If you're going to be talking about the limiting factors to photosynthesis, you have to mention carbon dioxide, which makes sense. When you think about it, THC is a 21 carbon molecule. In other words, for every one THC molecule, there are 21 atoms of carbon, and those come from CO2, which get assimilated into the plant through photosynthesis. The third limiting factor we talk about is water. I know you're probably thinking why is water going to limit photosynthesis? Well, actually, water is one of the reactants in the equation for photosynthesis. But more importantly is if the plant starts having water stress, the plants are going to close their stomata. Those are the pores that allow CO2 in, but also let water out of the leaves. So if you're closing down your pores, you have less CO2 coming in, that's less photosynthesis. The fourth limiting factor that we're going to be talking about is oxygen. And you're probably thinking right now, why is oxygen important to a plant? Plants photosynthesize. They make oxygen for us to breathe in, right? Well, yes, plants do create oxygen through the process of photosynthesis. In fact, the oxygen comes from water being split. However, in most plants, and cannabis included, There are places where plants don't photosynthesize. For example, the root zone. Cannabis roots need oxygen just like you and I do. If oxygen does become a limiting factor in the root zone, the plant will actually close down its stomata. Therefore, not as much CO2 would be absorbed and not as much photosynthesis can occur. If oxygen is a limiting factor in the roots for a long enough period of time, root tissue will start dying off. And that plays a big factor in our next limiting factor that we'll be talking about. The fifth limiting factor to photosynthesis that we're going to be talking about in this video series is nutrients. You may not realize this, but chlorophyll, which is the pigment that is primarily used for photosynthesis, has magnesium in the middle of it. If your crop is deficient in magnesium, you can probably guess you're going to have less chlorophyll for photosynthesis and therefore limit the amount of photosynthesis you can do. And finally, the sixth limiting factor we're talking about is air, the temperature, and relative humidity. All these are very complex scenarios and limiting factors. However, this one's really complex. There's a lot to this, and therefore we have to use a lot of technology and equipment and techniques to help control the environment around the relative humidity, temperature, and just general air quality around the plants in general. If I could provide a too long didn't read synopsis of the Cannabis Grower's Handbook, it would be basically this. In order to grow a lot of the best quality cannabis that you can for your grow site or your facility, you basically need to limit the limiting factors. There can only be one limiting factor at a time. So if you don't have enough light is your limiting factor, and these other limiting factors are not currently the limiting factor to net photosynthesis. You know, here at Doc Robb Farms, I wanted to create this series of videos to basically talk about the equipment that we use in-house. We do a lot of validation research on new techniques, new technology, and then the ones that actually do a good job, we start using in our facility. You know, Walt Disney said when he built Disneyland that he would never be done building that park. And the reason why is because he always wanted to be innovating and creating new fun for the people that come to visit. And much like that, basically what we're looking at is we want to see the new innovative technology, the new things that can help us grow cannabis more efficiently or better quality and just better for the customer in general. The technology that I would like to be talking about in this lineup of videos are the ones that we use personally in our grows, or I have personal experience from my PhD research or to the times I've done consulting and management deals in cannabis and other crops. But basically, if we don't use it, if I don't have a personal experience with it, we're not going to be talking about it in the videos. So in other words, if you're hearing about some of this equipment in these videos, that means we use them personally. That means they're good for our facility, and they're probably going to be good for yours as well. The last thing I would ever want to do is have videos where we're talking about and recommending and endorsing equipment that I've never touched, I've never used. That'd be very unscientific of me, and it goes against everything I did at my alma mater, UC Davis. Thank you for watching this, and please do enjoy the next series of videos that we do on how to limit the limiting factors of photosynthesis in cannabis cultivation.